Long before she walked into the gala, Scarlett Donovan had already endured 1,000 silent heartbreaks. They were the kind of wounds no one else could see, the kind carried behind a practiced smile, the kind that left scars deeper than skin. Pregnancy was supposed to be a season of joy. For Scarlett, it was meant to be a time filled with baby names whispered at midnight, gentle hands on her growing belly, and the comfort of knowing she was building a family with the man she loved. Instead, it became a season of loneliness. Each night, she sat alone in their sprawling penthouse, her hand resting on her unborn child, listening to the empty silence of a home that used to feel alive. The laughter was gone. The warmth was gone. All that remained were unanswered questions and the cold echo of Daniel's excuses. "I'm working late. This is for us. You wouldn't understand." But Scarlett understood. She understood that she was no longer his priority, no longer the woman he wanted beside him. She understood that somewhere out there, her husband was giving his attention, his charm, his affection, to someone else. The pain wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. Scarlett had given up her dreams for him, traded her career for his ambitions, silenced her voice so his could be louder. She had built her life around Daniel, believing he was her partner, her protector. And now, carrying his child, she realized she had been nothing more than a stepping stone. The cruelest moments came late at night, when the city lights glowed through the window and she lay awake, tears soaking her pillow. Her baby kicked, as if reminding her she wasn't truly alone, and yet the emptiness inside her was unbearable. She whispered promises to her child, "I'll protect you, no matter what," while her heart broke at the thought that Daniel, the man who should have been there, didn't care. Scarlett's pain wasn't loud. It wasn't the kind of rage that shatters dishes or fills a room with screaming. It was quiet, suffocating. It was the way her hands trembled when she folded tiny baby clothes by herself. It was the way she practiced smiling in the mirror, trying to convince herself she was strong. It was the way she avoided her own reflection some days, because the woman staring back at her looked too fragile, too lost. She kept hoping Daniel would come back to her. That one night he would walk through the door, remorse in his eyes, ready to start over. But every hope ended with disappointment. Every promise he made dissolved into lies, and the more she hoped, the more it hurt. Scarlett carried not only the weight of her unborn child, but also the crushing weight of humiliation. Society's whispers reached her ears, cruel and cutting. Poor Scarlett. She let herself go. No wonder he found someone else. Each word sliced through her, adding to the storm already raging inside. Still, she endured. Not for herself, but for the baby she carried. Every tear she shed in silence became fuel for her determination. She told herself she would survive this. She would protect her child, even if it meant facing the world alone. But survival didn't erase the pain. And as she stood outside the gala that night, taking a deep breath before walking in, Scarlett carried with her every sleepless night, every broken promise, every silent tear. Her pain was real, her humiliation was raw. And yet beneath it all, there was something Daniel and Cassandra had underestimated. Strength. Because a woman's pain, when ignored and mocked, can turn into the very fire that burns down everything built on lies. In the world of billionaires, power isn't just measured in money, it's measured in silence. The ones who hold the most influence often speak the least, and no one embodied that truth more than Ethan Blackwell. For years, his name circulated like a whisper. Some said he was a ghost billionaire, a man who owned half the city yet avoided the spotlight with surgical precision. Others claimed he had retreated from public life after personal tragedy. But those who truly understood the world of wealth knew one thing. Ethan Blackwell didn't disappear. He observed, he calculated, and when he moved, it was never without purpose. What no one realized, not Daniel, not Cassandra, not the elite gathered in the ballroom, was that Ethan Blackwell had been watching Scarlett Donovan for a long time. Their paths had crossed years ago, before Daniel ever entered the picture. Scarlett had been a rising designer, pouring her heart into a community project that transformed an abandoned warehouse into a youth art center. Ethan, intrigued by her vision, had anonymously provided funding. He had admired her then, her quiet strength, her ability to create beauty without needing to boast about it. He saw in her something rare, authenticity in a world obsessed with facades. When Scarlett married Daniel, Ethan stepped back. He respected her choice, even if he disagreed with it. But when whispers of Daniel's arrogance and infidelity began to circulate, Ethan quietly positioned himself nearby. He didn't interfere. He didn't gossip. He simply waited, understanding that the truth always revealed itself in time. And tonight, the gala was his moment. From the shadows of the balcony, Ethan watched as Daniel paraded Cassandra across the stage. He saw the arrogance in Daniel's grin, the pride in Cassandra's smirk, and the collective unease of the audience. But when the doors opened and Scarlett walked in, pregnant, radiant, unbroken, Ethan felt something shift. This was no longer Daniel's show. As Scarlett took her first steps into the ballroom, Ethan moved as well. He descended the staircase, cutting through the crowd like a blade through silk. Heads turned, whispers followed, and cameras pivoted. Ethan Blackwell rarely appeared at public events. His presence was a statement, louder than any speech Daniel could give. Scarlett noticed him as he approached. For a moment, her breath caught. Ethan was taller than she remembered, his presence commanding but not oppressive. His eyes, calm, steady, met hers, and for the first time that evening, Scarlett felt something she hadn't felt in months. Safe. "Scarlett," he greeted softly, his voice carrying a warmth that contrasted the coldness of the room. He didn't bow or extend his hand for show. He simply stood beside her, a silent shield against the storm. The crowd reacted instantly. Murmurs rippled like waves. "Scarlett Donovan with Ethan Blackwell?" The whispers grew into a roar. Daniel's face turned crimson, Cassandra's smirk shattered, and the photographers' cameras flashed like lightning. Daniel sputtered into the microphone. "What is this?" His arrogance wavered for the first time all night. Ethan didn't answer him. His eyes never left Scarlett's. In that moment, his presence said everything words could not. "You are not alone. You were never powerless, and tonight you will not fall." Scarlett straightened her shoulders, drawing strength from the ally at her side. For months she had carried her pain in silence. Now, with Ethan beside her, she realized she didn't have to carry it alone. And the entire ballroom knew it too. Scarlett Donovan was no longer the abandoned wife. She was the woman standing next to Ethan Blackwell, the man powerful enough to bring Daniel Donovan's empire to its knees. The moment Scarlett entered the ballroom, all eyes shifted. The atmosphere, once buzzing with shallow laughter and champagne chatter, turned thick with tension. For the first time that night, Daniel Donovan felt his control slipping. His carefully crafted show was no longer about him and Cassandra. It was about Scarlett. And he hated it. He gripped the microphone tighter, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cracking glass. "Well, look who decided to join us," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Ladies and gentlemen, my wife, Scarlett Donovan. Isn't it surprising she found the strength to leave the house?" Gasps scattered through the crowd. Scarlett froze for a split second, the cruelty of his words slicing through her like a blade. He was mocking her pregnancy, mocking the very life they had once celebrated together. Cassandra leaned close to Daniel, her lips curling into a poisonous smile as she whispered something in his ear. He chuckled, emboldened, then addressed the crowd again. "You see, Scarlett has been under the weather, emotional. You know how it is with women in her condition. But don't worry, she's well taken care of." His eyes flicked to Cassandra, making sure the insinuation landed. The insult wasn't just personal, it was public. He was painting Scarlett as weak, unstable, a woman unable to handle her role as his wife. And in this room filled with reporters, investors, and socialites, the damage was meant to be permanent. Scarlett's heart pounded, her cheeks flushed with heat, not just from embarrassment, but from the humiliation of being reduced to a punchline in front of strangers. For months she had endured his silence, his absence, his betrayal. But this open degradation, was a cruelty she hadn't imagined he was capable of. Some in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few women whispered angrily, their eyes narrowing at Daniel's arrogance. But others laughed nervously, unwilling to risk falling out of favor with the billionaire. The cameras flashed, capturing Scarlett's pain, immortalizing the moment Daniel thought he had destroyed her. Scarlett's hand instinctively went to her belly, as though shielding her unborn child from the venom being spewed. She wanted to scream, to shout the truth, that Daniel was a liar, that he had betrayed her, That Cassandra wasn't some glowing success but a thief of love and loyalty. But the words caught in her throat, trapped by the crushing weight of the moment. Daniel smirked, sensing victory. "Scarlett, dear, perhaps you should sit. You look overwhelmed." His voice dripped with false concern, each word twisted into a dagger. He gestured toward a chair near the back of the room, as though relegating her to the shadows where he believed she belonged. Scarlett stood frozen, trembling not from weakness but from the fury building inside her. The room blurred with whispers, every pair of eyes watching to see if she would break. Daniel thrived on that anticipation. He wanted to see her collapse, wanted to stamp out what little dignity she had left. But then, just as Scarlett felt the tears threatening to fall, a quiet presence grounded her. Ethan Blackwell's hand touched her elbow gently, steadying her. His eyes locked onto hers, calm and unwavering. No words were needed. His presence reminded her of something she had almost forgotten, her worth. Daniel's smirk faltered as he noticed the exchange. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. But he covered it quickly, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," he declared, clinking his champagne against Cassandra's. The crowd raised theirs hesitantly, though the air remained heavy, fractured. Scarlett lowered her gaze, tears shimmering but unfallen. She knew Daniel believed he had humiliated her, broken her completely. What he didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Because Scarlett Donovan would not leave that ballroom defeated. She would leave it transformed. Scarlett Donovan had always been known for her quiet grace. She was the woman who stood beside Daniel at red carpets, the one who smiled politely while he took center stage, the one who blended into the background so his light could shine brighter. But as she stood in the ballroom, her dignity under assault and her pain displayed like a spectacle, something inside her cracked. And from that crack, something stronger emerged. She realized in that moment that Daniel wanted her to shrink. He wanted her to disappear into the shadows, to confirm the narrative he had built about her being weak, fragile, and replaceable. Cassandra wanted the same. The mistress thrived on Scarlett's silence, her absence, her invisibility. But Scarlett was no longer willing to disappear. With Ethan's steady presence at her side, Scarlett straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. She wiped the shimmer of tears from her eyes and allowed herself a deep, steady breath. The room, filled with the scent of roses and expensive perfume, seemed to hold its breath with her. Then, like a queen reclaiming her throne, Scarlett began to move. She didn't retreat to the back of the room as Daniel had suggested. Instead, she walked forward, each step deliberate, the midnight blue fabric of her gown flowing like liquid night. The lights caught the subtle shimmer of the dress, and suddenly, the cameras that had been focused on Daniel and Cassandra swiveled to capture her. Every click of a shutter was a small act of rebellion. Every flash of light was a reminder that she still commanded attention. The whispers began to change. "She looks incredible. She's glowing. She doesn't look broken at all." Scarlett reached the center of the ballroom, close enough that Daniel and Cassandra could no longer ignore her presence. Daniel's smirk faltered again, but Cassandra leaned closer to him, whispering urgently, trying to mask her own unease with another sly smile. "Scarlett," Daniel said into the microphone, his voice tight, "perhaps you should sit down. This isn't the place." Scarlett raised her hand, silencing him without a word. The gesture was subtle, but the impact was thunderous. The entire ballroom erupted into murmurs. It was the first time she had ever cut him off in public. Her voice, when it came, was steady and clear. "I came here tonight not to sit in the shadows, not to be hidden away, and certainly not to be humiliated. I came here because I refuse to let lies write the story of my life." The crowd gasped, the weight of her words slicing through the thick tension. Daniel tried to laugh, but it came out brittle, broken. Cassandra shifted uneasily, her nails digging into Daniel's arm. Scarlett continued, her eyes unwavering. "For years, I stood by Daniel, supporting him, believing in him, sacrificing for him. And tonight, he thought parading another woman at his side would erase me. But let me make one thing clear. I am not erased. I am here. And I am stronger than he ever imagined." Applause broke out in the corner of the room, hesitant at first, then spreading like wildfire. It wasn't loud yet, but it was enough to shift the energy of the night. For the first time, the humiliation didn't belong to Scarlett. It belonged to Daniel. Scarlett turned slightly, her gaze catching Ethan's. His small nod told her everything. "You're winning." The cameras kept flashing, immortalizing the moment. Scarlett, radiant in her strength, no longer looked like the abandoned wife. She looked like a woman reborn, standing in the ruins of betrayal, but refusing to crumble. And in that instant, the gala stopped being Daniel Donovan's showcase. It became Scarlett Donovan's stage of glory. Daniel Donovan had built his empire not only on money, but on manipulation. He had a talent for twisting the truth until it bent in his favor, for convincing people to doubt their own perceptions. And as Scarlett stood in the center of the ballroom, glowing with strength instead of shame, Daniel knew he had to regain control. He leaned into the microphone, his laugh forced but confident enough to fool the untrained ear. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth, "I think we should all take a moment here. Scarlett is emotional. As you can see, she's expecting. Pregnancy can be overwhelming, and sometimes it causes confusion." The word confusion landed like poison. It wasn't just an insult, it was an attempt to undermine her credibility, to paint her as irrational. The same tactic he had used in private, now weaponized in public. Scarlett's stomach twisted, but she stood tall. She had heard this before. Every time she questioned the late-night calls, the perfume on his suits, the second phone he thought she didn't know about, he had dismissed her. "You're imagining things. You're overreacting. You're too sensitive." Tonight, he was playing the same card, but this time, he wasn't whispering in their kitchen. He was announcing it to the world. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some women in the audience narrowed their eyes, exchanging knowing looks. They had heard the same excuses before from men who tried to silence them, but others nodded along, unwilling to challenge a billionaire's narrative. Gaslighting was powerful because it planted seeds of doubt. Daniel smiled wider, sensing traction. "Scarlett, my dear, you've been under a lot of stress. Planning for the baby, adjusting to the changes, it hasn't been easy for you. That's why I've had Cassandra here, to help me manage things. She's been supportive, steady, exactly what we needed in this busy season." The audacity made Cassandra glow with pride. She tilted her chin upward, basking in the role of savior. To the audience, Daniel was trying to spin a story where Cassandra wasn't a mistress but a helper, a necessity, the strong figure stepping in where his wife had failed. Scarlett clenched her fists at her side. She wanted to scream, to rip apart the lies he was weaving. But Ethan's steady gaze from across the room reminded her, patience. Let him talk. Let him dig his grave. Daniel continued, his voice dropping into that patronizing tone Scarlett knew too well. "You've always been fragile, Scarlett. Sensitive. That's not a flaw. It's who you are. But sometimes fragility isn't enough for this world. Sometimes a man needs strength beside him, and Cassandra has been that strength." The words cut deep, sharper than knives. He wasn't just dismissing her. He was rewriting her entire identity, reducing her sacrifices to weakness, her loyalty to fragility. The room buzzed with tension. Some gasped, others shook their heads, and the cameras caught every word. Daniel believed he was winning. He thought he was silencing her, painting her as hysterical, rewriting the narrative in real time. But Scarlett didn't move. She didn't crumble. Instead, she let the silence stretch, the weight of his cruelty hanging in the air like smoke. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Because Scarlett knew something Daniel didn't. She knew the truth was about to come crashing down on him, harder than any lie he could spin. And when it did, no amount of gaslighting would save him. For the first time, Daniel Donovan's manipulation wasn't planting doubt. It was planting his own destruction. If Daniel's words were daggers, Cassandra Monroe's were poison. She didn't just wound, she infected, spreading her venom with a smile sweet enough to disguise the cruelty underneath. As Daniel lowered the microphone, Cassandra slid closer to him, her crimson gown shimmering like fire under the chandeliers. She took the microphone from his hand with practiced ease, her painted lips curling into a smile that dripped with superiority. "Scarlett," she began, her voice syrupy and smooth, "I admire your courage for being here tonight. Truly, it takes determination to walk into a room like this, knowing everyone has seen the headlines, heard the whispers. But I suppose, for some women, denial is the only strength they have left." A ripple of gasps swept through the ballroom. The insult was sharp, But Cassandra delivered it with such elegance that some guests weren't sure whether they had heard cruelty or pity. That was Cassandra's gift. Twisting the knife while pretending to offer comfort, Scarlett stood still, her hands pressed protectively over her belly, her eyes locked on Cassandra. Every instinct screamed at her to retaliate, but she remained silent. She remembered Ethan's quiet advice, the power of patience. Let them speak. Let them reveal who they truly are. Cassandra turned her attention to the audience, her voice carrying a false sincerity. Daniel and I didn't plan for any of this. Love has a way of finding you when you least expect it. And while it may be hard for some people to accept, the truth is undeniable. We are partners in every sense of the word. She laced her fingers through Daniel's, raising their joined hands like a trophy. The cameras exploded with flashes. Cassandra wasn't finished. She tilted her head toward Scarlett, her eyes glinting. But of course, it must be difficult for you, Scarlett, watching from the sidelines, clinging to a title that no longer belongs to you. I almost feel sorry for you. Almost. The words landed like stones, heavy and deliberate. The crowd shifted uneasily, but no one dared interrupt. Cassandra was basking in her moment, reveling in the humiliation she was inflicting. She believed this was her coronation, the night Scarlett was erased and she was crowned. Some guests exchanged pitying looks toward Scarlett, but Cassandra interpreted their silence as agreement. Her smile widened. You had your chance, Scarlett. You were given everything. Daniel's love, his wealth, his name. But you couldn't keep it. You weren't enough. That's why I'm here. Because where you failed, I will succeed. The cruelty was surgical. She wasn't just mocking Scarlett's marriage. She was mocking her womanhood, her identity, her very existence. Scarlett's breath caught in her throat. For a moment she felt the crushing weight of Cassandra's words, the sting of being measured and found lacking. The urge to run, to escape the spotlight, pressed down on her like a suffocating hand. But then she heard it. A single voice from the corner of the room. A woman, bold and unafraid, whispering just loud enough for others to hear. She's vile. The words spread quickly, bouncing from guest to guest until the murmurs grew louder than Cassandra's voice. The tide was turning, though Cassandra was too blinded by pride to notice. She raised her chin, delivering her final blow. Scarlett, darling, you should learn something tonight. Men like Daniel don't choose women who hide in the shadows. They choose women like me, women who shine. Cassandra's laughter rang out, high and cruel, echoing through the ballroom. But what she didn't realize, what the cameras captured, what the audience felt, was that Scarlett Donovan, standing silently, wasn't fading into the shadows. She was gathering her strength. And soon the woman Cassandra mocked would become the woman who destroyed her. The sound of Cassandra's laughter still echoed in Scarlett Donovan's ears long after the microphone had been lowered. It was the kind of laughter designed to haunt, sharp and triumphant, echoing through the hollow parts of her heart where hope used to live. Scarlett had stood tall for as long as she could, but every cruel word, every mocking smile, every camera flash felt like another stone piled onto her chest. She could feel the weight crushing her, threatening to pull her into the floor beneath her feet. The ballroom blurred. Faces melted together into a haze of judgmental eyes and whispered rumors. Her breath came shallow, her throat tight. The walls of the Crystal Renaissance Hotel seemed to close in around her. She pressed her hand against her belly, whispering silently to her child. Hold on, baby. Please, hold on. Ethan's steady presence had kept her upright, but even his calm gaze couldn't hold back the tidal wave of humiliation. Scarlett turned, almost blindly, and walked toward the side doors. Each step felt heavier than the last, her heels clicking against the marble like the ticking of a clock counting down her strength. She slipped into a quiet corridor behind the ballroom, her back pressing against the cold wall. And then, finally, the dam broke. Scarlett's sobs came in gasps, raw and desperate. She slid down to the floor, burying her face in her trembling hands. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her chest heaving as months of silent suffering poured out of her in uncontrollable waves. For the first time, she let herself unravel completely, no longer holding on to the mask of composure. In the solitude of that hallway, Scarlett confronted the darkest thought she had carried all along. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not enough. The shame was unbearable. She thought of the guests laughing behind her back, of the cameras capturing her weakness, of Cassandra's venomous smile. She thought of Daniel, standing proud, declaring her fragile, unfit, unwanted. And she believed it, at least in that moment. Her sobs echoed down the corridor, each one a plea for the life she used to have, for the love she thought she could protect, for the strength she feared she no longer possessed. Ethan appeared quietly, his footsteps soft against the marble. He didn't speak at first. He simply crouched beside her, offering a folded handkerchief. Scarlett looked up through blurred vision, startled to see no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm not strong enough. Not tonight. Not ever." Ethan shook his head, his voice firm but gentle. "Scarlett, you've carried a man's empire on your shoulders, even while he tore you apart. You've carried his child alone, through nights he should have been there, but wasn't. And you walked into that ballroom knowing they'd try to destroy you. If that's not strength, I don't know what is." Scarlett's tears slowed, his words striking deeper than Cassandra's insults ever could. But the doubt still lingered, clinging to her like a shadow. She gripped his handkerchief tightly, staring at the ground. "I feel broken," she whispered. "Then let yourself break," Ethan replied softly. "Because sometimes breaking is what makes us whole again. You don't have to fight tonight, Scarlett, not yet. But when the moment comes, and it will, you'll rise. And when you do, they'll never forget it." Scarlett closed her eyes, her breathing uneven but steadying. The storm inside her hadn't passed, but somewhere in the chaos, a spark of resolve flickered. She had broken, but in that break, the foundation of her rebirth was being built. And the very tears that made her feel weak tonight would become the fire that burned Daniel and Cassandra's empire to ashes. Scarlett sat slumped against the cold marble wall, her breaths uneven, her body trembling from the weight of everything she had endured. She wiped her eyes with Ethan's handkerchief, the fabric damp with the evidence of her breaking point. But even in her despair, she noticed something about Ethan. He wasn't just offering comfort. He was waiting for the right moment to give her something more. Ethan crouched beside her, his eyes steady, his presence a shield against the chaos of the gala roaring just beyond the doors. "Scarlett," he said quietly, "I didn't come here tonight to watch you fall. I came here because I know the truth, and I can prove it." Scarlett blinked, confusion flashing across her tear-stained face. "The truth?" Ethan nodded, slipping a small leather folder from inside his jacket. He placed it gently in her lap, as though handing her a lifeline. "Daniel thinks he's untouchable. He believes no one sees the deals he makes in the shadows, the accounts he hides, the people he steps on. But I've been watching. I've been collecting." Her trembling hands opened the folder. Inside were documents, bank transfers, emails, photographs. Each page told a story of betrayal not just against her, but against everyone Daniel had built his empire upon. Illegal transactions with overseas accounts, bribes disguised as consulting fees. Evidence of misused charity funds, the very money he claimed to be raising tonight. Scarlett's breath caught. She traced her fingers over the papers, her mind reeling. This could ruin him. Ethan's voice was calm, deliberate. "It will ruin him, but only if the right person brings it into the light. Daniel expects his enemies in the business world to attack him. He's prepared for that. But you, his wife, the woman he tried to erase, you are the one person he never thought could rise against him. That's why you have to be the one to use this." Scarlett's chest tightened. She felt the weight of the evidence in her hands, heavier than any burden she had carried before. For months she had been powerless, voiceless. And now, sitting in a quiet hallway with tears still on her cheeks, she realized she held the power to destroy Daniel. But fear clawed at her. "If I expose him, he'll come after me. He'll take everything." Ethan's eyes softened. "He already took everything, Scarlett. Your love, your trust, your dignity. What else is there to lose? But if you fight, if you stand tall with this in your hands, you don't just protect yourself, you protect your child, and you take back what he stole from you." Scarlett swallowed hard, staring down at the folder. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the glossy photographs inside. Broken, yes, but also unyielding. Her voice trembled, but there was steel beneath it. "Why me, Ethan? Why help me?" He hesitated, then spoke with quiet conviction. "Because years ago, I saw who you were. The The woman who built beauty from nothing. The woman who didn't need wealth to be powerful. And I couldn't stand by and watch Daniel destroy that. You deserve to rise, Scarlett, and I'll stand with you when you do. Something shifted inside her then. The tears on her cheeks began to dry, her breathing steadied. She clutched the folder against her chest, not as a burden, but as a weapon. For the first time in months, Scarlett Donovan didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a woman with power. And power, in the hands of the betrayed, is the sharpest blade of all. The folder lay heavy in Scarlett's hands, not as a weight dragging her down, but as a torch illuminating a path she had never dared to walk. For months she had been hidden in Daniel's shadow, dressed in muted tones, her glow dimmed, her voice silenced. Tonight, that ended. Tonight, she would no longer look like the woman Daniel discarded. She would look like the woman who had returned to claim everything he tried to take away. Ethan seemed to sense her resolve. He extended his hand, helping her up from the marble floor. "Scarlett," he said softly, "if you're going to take back your story, you need to look the part. Not as the wife Daniel betrayed, but as the woman Daniel underestimated." Scarlett's heart pounded. She glanced down at her midnight blue gown. It was elegant, but it still whispered of the past, the woman who had walked into the gala unsure, trembling, carrying the weight of humiliation. She needed more than elegance. She needed armor. Ethan guided her to a private suite upstairs, away from the noise of the ballroom. Inside, a team of stylists, friends loyal to Ethan, women who owed him favors, waited. Scarlett hesitated at the threshold, overwhelmed. "I don't need all this," she whispered. One of the women, a silver-haired stylist with kind eyes, shook her head. "You don't need it, but you deserve it. Tonight, they tried to bury you. Let's show them you can rise." Scarlett sat down before the mirror. Her reflection startled her. Swollen eyes, smudged mascara, a woman who looked fragile and broken. But as hands worked around her, brushing her hair, smoothing her skin, choosing fabric that shimmered like starlight, her reflection began to change. Slowly, the image of weakness faded, replaced by a vision of strength. They slipped her into a gown unlike anything she had ever worn. A deep emerald green, its fabric flowing like water yet structured like armor. It embraced her pregnant form not as something to hide, but as something powerful, radiant. Her child was not her weakness. Her child was her crown. Her makeup was softened but bold where it mattered. Eyes lined sharp with defiance, lips painted with quiet fire. Her hair cascaded in waves, not to please Daniel or mimic Cassandra, but to frame her face as the woman she truly was. When she finally looked in the mirror, Scarlett didn't see the abandoned wife anymore. She didn't see fragility, she saw a queen. Ethan stood at the doorway, watching quietly. When Scarlett turned to face him, his eyes widened slightly, not with lust, but with awe. "Now," he said, his voice low, "the world will see what I've always seen. A woman who cannot be erased." Scarlett lifted her chin. For the first time in months she smiled. Not the brittle smile of survival, but the confident smile of someone who knew her power. She picked up the folder again, clutching it not to her chest but at her side. Like a weapon she was ready to wield. She walked toward the door, each step purposeful. The corridor stretched before her, leading back to the ballroom, back to the stage where Daniel and Cassandra still believed they were untouchable. But when those doors opened again, it would not be the same Scarlett Donovan who had walked out moments earlier in tears. It would be the reborn Scarlett, the woman transformed, the woman armed, the woman ready to set fire to the lies and watch Daniel's empire burn. The doors to the ballroom swung open again, and every head turned. This time, the air didn't fill with pitying whispers. It filled with stunned silence. Scarlett Donovan walked in, transformed. Her emerald gown shimmered like fire beneath the chandeliers, her posture tall, her eyes steady. She carried herself not as a discarded wife, but as a woman reborn. And in her hand was the leather folder, the weapon that would end Daniel Donovan's reign. The murmurs began almost instantly. "Is that Scarlett? She looks radiant. That's not the same woman who left crying." Daniel's smug grin faltered. Cassandra's painted smile slipped into something brittle, her fingers tightening around Daniel's arm. The cameras flashed furiously, desperate to capture the moment. Scarlett didn't hesitate. She walked straight toward the stage, each step deliberate, the gown flowing like a banner behind her. When she reached the center, Ethan Blackwell joined her at her side. The sight of them together was enough to send a ripple of shock through the crowd. Daniel grabbed the microphone, his voice laced with false bravado. "Scarlett, darling, what is this? Another emotional display? You're making a spectacle of yourself." Scarlett raised her hand, cutting him off. The gesture, small yet commanding, silenced the room. She took the microphone from his grasp with calm precision, her eyes never leaving his. "This isn't an emotional display," she said, her voice clear and steady. "This is the truth, and tonight, the truth will finally be seen." She opened the folder. The rustle of papers echoed louder than Daniel's forced laughter. Scarlett held up a document, her gaze sweeping the crowd. For months, Daniel Donovan has paraded himself as a man of honor, a philanthropist, a leader. But behind closed doors, his empire was built on lies. Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Daniel stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Scarlett, stop this nonsense. You don't understand what you're holding." "I understand perfectly," Scarlett interrupted. Her voice carried the weight of every silent night, every betrayal, every tear. She turned toward the audience. "These are records of Daniel diverting charity funds into his personal accounts. Money raised for sick children, for families in need, stolen to fund private jets and luxury gifts." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Reporters scrambled with their pens. Cameras clicked like thunder. Investors exchanged horrified looks. Scarlett lifted another document, her eyes burning into Daniel's. "Here are emails proving he bribed officials to secure contracts. And here," she held up a photograph, "evidence of offshore accounts where millions were hidden." Daniel lunged forward, his voice booming. "This is slander. She's unstable, emotional. She's trying to ruin me because she can't accept reality." But the crowd was no longer listening to him. Their eyes were on Scarlett, their ears tuned to her every word. For the first time, Daniel's voice sounded small, desperate. Scarlett took a deep breath, her hand resting gently on her belly. "For months, I believed I was powerless. I let myself be erased, humiliated, mocked. But tonight, I stand not just for myself, but for the child I carry, and for every person Daniel betrayed." The ballroom fell silent again, the weight of her words pressing on every chest. Scarlett's voice didn't tremble. "Daniel Donovan is not a man of honor. He is a liar, a thief, and a traitor, and I will no longer be silent." The room erupted. Applause, gasps, shouts. Some guests rose to their feet, clapping loudly, while others stared at Daniel with disgust. The tide had shifted completely. And as Daniel's face drained of color, Scarlett knew the empire he built on lies had just begun to crumble. Under her hand. For a heartbeat, silence gripped the ballroom. It was the kind of silence that follows an earthquake when the ground has stopped shaking, but everyone is still too stunned to move. Scarlett Donovan's words hung in the air like shards of glass, impossible to ignore, impossible to step around. Then the eruption began. Gasps turned to whispers, whispers to murmurs, murmurs to a roar. Reporters rushed forward, their cameras flashing like lightning storms. Investors huddled together, voices sharp with alarm. "Is this true? Those documents, are they real? We can't be associated with him if this leaks." The orchestra, unsure whether to play or remain silent, slowly lowered their instruments. Waiters froze mid-step, champagne glasses trembling on silver trays. The entire room had shifted its focus, no longer on Daniel Donovan, the powerful billionaire, but on Scarlett Donovan, the betrayed wife who had just lit the match. Daniel tried to laugh, but it came out brittle, broken. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, don't let this spectacle distract you. My wife is confused, she's emotional. None of this means anything." His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through the arrogance he usually wore like armor. But the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. Too many eyes had seen the documents. Too many ears had heard Scarlett's steady voice. A senator's wife whispered loudly enough for half the room to hear. "He stole from children's charities. If this is true, he's finished." Another investor, face pale, shoved his phone into his pocket. "Pull everything. We can't afford to be tied to this man." Cassandra clung to Daniel's arm, her smile faltering under the weight of the stares now directed at her. She leaned in, her voice sharp though whispered. "Do something, Daniel. You're losing them." Scarlett remained calm, her emerald gown glowing under the chandelier light. She didn't shout, didn't scramble. Her silence in that moment spoke louder than Daniel's frantic words. She had dropped the truth, and now it was doing the work for her. The press surged forward. microphones raised. "Mrs. Donovan, can you confirm when you discovered this? Do you have more evidence? Is it true the funds were stolen from Bright Futures itself?" Daniel slammed a fist against the podium. "Enough. This is all lies. She's trying to destroy me because she can't accept our marriage is over." But even his anger couldn't drown out the truth that was already spreading like wildfire. Phones buzzed across the room as guests forwarded photos of the documents. Reporters were already drafting headlines. Investors were already calling their attorneys. The empire Daniel built on arrogance and deceit was crumbling in real time, and the entire city was watching. Scarlett placed her hand on her belly again, her voice soft but strong enough to carry. "You all deserve to know the truth. My child deserves to know the truth. Tonight isn't just about betrayal, it's about justice. And justice begins here." Applause erupted, louder than Daniel could have imagined, echoing through the ballroom like thunder. It wasn't polite or hesitant, it was fierce, defiant, a wave of approval for Scarlett and a death sentence for him. Daniel's face turned pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. For the first time in his career, he was no longer in control of the narrative. And as the cameras zoomed in on Scarlett's unshakable gaze, the world realized that the woman they had once pitied had just become the woman they would rally behind. The applause echoing through the ballroom felt like a funeral bell to Daniel Donovan. Only it wasn't Scarlett's funeral, it was his. Every clap was a nail in the coffin of his empire, every cheer a reminder that he had lost control. His jaw clenched so tightly, it looked as though his teeth might crack. Rage boiled beneath his skin, flushing his face red as cameras captured every flicker of panic. He had built his reputation on dominance, on being the man who always had the upper hand. To lose it now, and to Scarlett, the wife he thought powerless, was unthinkable. "Enough!" Daniel bellowed, his voice cracking through the applause. He snatched the microphone from its stand, his hand trembling not with weakness, but with fury. "You're all being manipulated. Do you really think a woman like her understands the complexities of my business? She's confused, emotional, and she's being used." He swung his glare toward Ethan Blackwell, standing silently beside Scarlett. "This is your doing, isn't it? You've always envied me, you've always wanted what I had. Now you're filling her head with lies to destroy me." The accusation drew more gasps, but not the kind Daniel wanted. Whispers spread through the crowd. Doubt, disapproval, even disgust. People had seen enough to recognize desperation when it was dripping from a man's voice. Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply said, "The only lies here are yours, Daniel. And tonight they're finally catching up with you." Daniel's rage only grew. He pounded the podium with his fist, rattling the microphone. "Scarlett, how dare you do this to me? After everything I gave you, my name, my wealth, my protection, this is how you repay me? You stand here pregnant with my child and spit in my face?" The cruelty in his words struck Scarlett like a whip. But this time, she didn't flinch. She stood tall, emerald gown shimmering like armor, her hand resting calmly on her belly. The crowd, however, reacted sharply. Murmurs of disapproval rippled outward. A woman near the front whispered loudly, "He calls that protection? That's abuse." Scarlett met Daniel's glare, her voice steady. "You didn't give me your name, Daniel. I gave it to you. You didn't give me your wealth. I helped you build it. And the only thing you ever offered as protection was a cage." The audience erupted into applause again, louder this time. Daniel's face twisted with fury, his eyes wild. He looked less like a powerful billionaire and more like a cornered animal. Cassandra tugged on his arm, her smile brittle, whispering frantically, "Stop, Daniel. You're making it worse." But Daniel shook her off violently, stepping closer to Scarlett. His voice dropped to a venomous growl, audible through the microphone. "You think you can humiliate me in front of my investors, my colleagues, the press? You think anyone will believe you over me?" Scarlett didn't look away. "They already do." The crowd roared again, and for the first time, Daniel staggered back. His arrogance, his control, his empire, all slipping like sand through his fists. He tried one last desperate play, slamming the folder shut on the podium. "None of this matters. These papers prove nothing. I am Daniel Donovan, and I am untouchable." But his voice cracked on the last word, betraying the truth everyone could now see. Daniel Donovan wasn't untouchable anymore. He was unraveling, and the entire world was watching him fall. As Daniel's rage spilled over, Cassandra Monroe felt her carefully crafted image slipping through her fingers. For months, she had prepared for this moment. The gala, the spotlight, the unveiling of herself as Daniel's true partner. But now, the eyes of the crowd that once fed her pride burned with suspicion. She forced a brittle smile, stepping forward to salvage what remained. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice dripping with faux sincerity, "please don't be misled. Scarlett's accusations are born out of bitterness. Daniel is a man of honor, and I—" She pressed a hand to her chest, feigning vulnerability. "I only ever wanted to support him." Some in the crowd shook their heads, others muttered under their breath. The applause that once followed Cassandra had been replaced by icy silence. Then Ethan Blackwell moved. He stepped forward, his voice steady and cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "Support him? Is that what you call blackmailing business partners? Is that what you call selling secrets from Daniel's company in exchange for luxury gifts?" The room erupted in gasps. Cassandra's face drained of color. "That's a lie," she said, her voice cracking. Ethan held up his phone. "Not a lie. Proof." He tapped the screen, and a projection appeared on the ballroom's massive LED display. Emails, photographs, recordings. Cassandra's face illuminated the screen, leaning close to rival CEOs, whispering promises in exchange for cash and jewels. Screenshots of her messages leaked across the crowd. "If you want access, you'll pay me first." The evidence was undeniable. The audience roared with shock. Some women covered their mouths, others shook their heads in disgust. Reporters scrambled, recording every second. Cassandra's mask of elegance cracked, replaced by panic. "You," she stammered, pointing at Ethan, her eyes wide with fury. "You set me up!" Ethan didn't flinch. "You set yourself up, Cassandra. Every lie you told, every dollar you stole, it was only a matter of time before the truth surfaced." Scarlett stepped forward now, her emerald gown gleaming, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "You thought humiliating me would crown you. You thought stealing my husband made you powerful, but power built on betrayal always collapses." Cassandra's composure shattered. "Scarlett, you don't understand. He doesn't love you. He loves me. I'm the one he chose." But her desperate words only made the crowd recoil further. Investors muttered angrily about breached contracts. Socialites whispered about her disgrace. A fashion executive near the front snapped, "She was scheduled to represent our brand next season." Not anymore. Cassandra's career, her carefully constructed facade, was crumbling before her eyes. She tried to clutch Daniel's arm, seeking refuge in the man she had sacrificed everything for. But Daniel, consumed by his own unraveling empire, shoved her hand away. "You're nothing but a liability," he spat, his words like acid. The cameras caught it all, the rejection, the humiliation, the tears welling in Cassandra's eyes. For the first time, she was the one being discarded. Scarlett's gaze didn't waver. "You wanted me erased, Cassandra. But look around. Tonight, it's you who disappears." The ballroom erupted again, not with laughter this time, but with cheers, applause, and the crackling energy of justice served. Cassandra stumbled backward, her heels catching on the hem of her gown, as photographers surged forward, their lenses merciless. And in that moment, Cassandra Monroe, who once believed she had won, realized the bitter truth. She was nothing more than a footnote in Scarlett Donovan's story of glory. The ballroom had never felt so alive. The same crowd that once whispered pity behind Scarlett Donovan's back now stood, their applause rolling like thunder against the marble walls. Reporters leaned over velvet ropes, microphones extended, desperate to capture every word. Cameras flashed not at Daniel, not at Cassandra, but at Scarlett. And she stood at the center, radiant in her emerald gown, no longer the forgotten wife, but the woman who had taken control of the story. Scarlett waited for the cheers to subside, her hand resting lightly on her belly, a silent reminder of the life she carried with her. Her voice, when it came, was steady and commanding. "For too long, I believed silence was strength, that if I endured, if I sacrificed, love would prevail. But tonight I learned something far more powerful. Silence protects the liar, not the truth." The audience erupted again, this time with shouts of agreement. Women in the crowd raised their glasses toward her. Men who once bowed to Daniel now avoided his gaze, ashamed to be associated with him. Scarlett raised her chin, her eyes sweeping across the room. Daniel Donovan thought this gala would be his showcase. He thought flaunting his mistress and humiliating his wife would make him untouchable. But tonight I stand before you, not as his victim, not as his shadow, but as his reckoning. Every word hit like a hammer. Daniel's face was pale, his jaw clenched, his fists shaking at his sides. Cassandra, pushed aside by her own disgrace, had shrunk into the crowd, desperately trying to escape the cameras still chasing her. Scarlett lifted the folder once more, her voice ringing clear. These documents prove that Daniel has betrayed not only me, but every one of you who trusted him. He stole from charities, lied to investors, and gambled with lives that depended on his promises. Tonight, the mask has fallen. A roar of outrage surged through the audience. Investors shouted angrily, demanding answers. A senator's wife declared loudly, "This man should be prosecuted." The room had turned completely, no longer an audience for Daniel's vanity, but a tribunal for his sins. Scarlett's eyes softened as she looked toward Ethan, who gave a small nod of encouragement. Then she turned back to the crowd, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. "I am not here to beg for sympathy. I am here to reclaim my dignity, to protect my child, and to remind every woman who has ever been silenced that her voice matters. That no man, no matter how powerful, has the right to erase her." The standing ovation that followed shook the chandeliers. Guests rose to their feet, clapping fiercely, some even cheering through tears. The cameras captured it all. The triumphant wife, the humbled billionaire, the shattered mistress. Daniel tried to speak, his voice drowned beneath the uproar. He slammed his fist on the podium, shouting, "This isn't over." But no one was listening. His words dissolved into the storm of applause, his presence already shrinking. Scarlett turned her gaze toward the photographers, her posture regal. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply stood tall, embodying grace, strength, and unbreakable resolve. For months, she had been invisible. Tonight, she was unforgettable. And as the chandeliers glittered above and the applause thundered below, Scarlett Donovan claimed her rightful place, not as the betrayed, but as the triumphant queen of the gala, her stage of glory. Daniel Donovan had built his empire on a foundation of arrogance, deception, and fear. For years it seemed indestructible, but in a single night, that empire began to crumble, and it happened in front of the very people who once worshipped him. As the applause for Scarlett thundered, Daniel tried desperately to hold the room together. He grabbed the microphone, his face slick with sweat. "You're all fools," he shouted. "This is nothing but a smear campaign. I am Daniel Donovan. I made this city." But no one cheered. No one applauded. Investors who once fought for his approval now stood in clusters, whispering angrily. Phones buzzed with calls to attorneys and board members. Within minutes, Daniel's stock began to plummet, notifications lighting up screens across the ballroom. "Shares are crashing. We're pulling our money. The Donovan name is toxic." Daniel's eyes darted frantically around the room. He spotted men who once called him brother, now refusing to meet his gaze. Women who once adored his charm now shook their heads with disgust. His empire wasn't just collapsing, it was being erased, piece by piece, by the very people he thought would always bow to him. Cassandra tried to inch closer, hoping to salvage what little protection his name might still offer. "Daniel," she whispered frantically, "we can still fix this." He shoved her aside, his voice venomous. "You're finished, Cassandra. You're nothing but a liability." The cameras caught it all. The mistress discarded like trash, the billionaire unraveling in real time. It was the opposite of the powerful image Daniel had hoped to project. Then, as if on cue, the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Two uniformed officers stepped in, their presence sending another ripple of gasps through the crowd. A man in a crisp suit followed, an investigator from the Financial Crimes Division. He held a warrant in his hand. "Daniel Donovan," the officer announced, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. "You are under investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and misuse of charitable funds." The ballroom exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Guests scrambled to record videos. Investors openly distanced themselves, some walking out to avoid being photographed near him. Daniel's face twisted in fury. "This is a setup. Do you know who I am? You can't do this to me." He tried to shove past the officers, but they blocked his path. Scarlett stood still, watching as the man who once controlled her every breath now thrashed like a desperate animal in a cage. For months, she had been silenced. Tonight, his roars meant nothing. The officers clasped cuffs around his wrists. The metallic click was louder than the orchestra had been all night. "No," Daniel shouted, his voice cracking. "I am untouchable. Do you hear me? Untouchable." But no one believed him anymore. Scarlett placed her hand gently on her belly, her voice calm as she spoke, not to him but to the room. "Power built on lies will always collapse. Tonight, you saw it fall." The applause returned, stronger than ever. Daniel's voice was drowned beneath it, swallowed whole by the very stage he had once claimed as his own. The officers dragged him toward the exit, cameras flashing, the once mighty billionaire reduced to a headline, "Daniel Donovan, exposed and arrested at charity gala." And as the doors closed behind him, the world knew it wasn't Scarlett Donovan who had been defeated. It was Daniel Donovan, brought down by his own arrogance, his empire collapsing in the ruins of betrayal. The doors of the Crystal Renaissance Hotel closed behind Daniel Donovan with a final metallic clang. His shouts, once the voice that commanded boardrooms and silenced opposition, faded into nothing more than background noise. The empire he had flaunted was gone, stripped away in front of the very people he once ruled. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere shifted. Where there had once been tension and scandal, there was now awe. All eyes were on Scarlett Donovan. She didn't raise her arms in victory. She didn't gloat. She simply stood with grace, her hand resting protectively on her belly, a living symbol of resilience. Ethan stepped forward, his presence steady as ever, though his eyes shone with quiet pride. "Scarlett," he murmured, "it's over." She looked up at him, her lips curving into a soft, almost disbelieving smile. "No," she corrected gently, "it's just beginning." The crowd erupted in applause once more. Not the polite applause reserved for speeches, but something deeper, a roar of respect, of solidarity. Women wiped away tears. Men nodded gravely, some ashamed that they had once admired Daniel. And the press, already sending headlines into the world, knew they weren't just reporting on a scandal. They were witnessing a rebirth. Scarlett stepped toward the microphone, her emerald gown glimmering under the chandelier light. The room fell silent again. This time, it wasn't because of shock or scandal, but because everyone wanted to hear her. Her voice was calm, clear, and filled with strength. "For months, I lived in silence. I believed that enduring betrayal and humiliation made me strong. But tonight, I learned that silence only serves the betrayer. Strength is not in enduring lies, it is in standing up to them." The audience nodded, hanging on her every word. Scarlett glanced toward the door where Daniel had been dragged out. "Power built on arrogance will always collapse, and love built on lies will always rot. But truth endures, dignity endures, and so will I." Her hand returned to her belly, her eyes softening. "I'm carrying a child who will one day ask me what happened here, and I will tell them the truth. Not that their father was a powerful man, but that he was a man undone by his own pride. And I will tell them that their mother stood tall, even when it hurt, because protecting dignity and truth is worth everything." The applause rose again, some guests even shouting her name. For the first time, Scarlett allowed herself a true smile, not of survival, but of victory. Later that night, as the gala wound down, reporters swarmed for final statements. Scarlett gave none. She didn't need to. Her silence now wasn't weakness, it was control. Every camera had captured her triumph. Every headline carried her truth. She had nothing left to prove. Outside, Ethan offered her his arm. "Where do you want to go from here?" he asked. Scarlett looked out at the city lights, her eyes gleaming with a mix of exhaustion and hope. "Forward," she said simply, and forward she went. In the weeks that followed, Daniel faced indictment, his empire dismantled piece by piece. Cassandra vanished from the spotlight, her name forever tarnished. But Scarlett rose. She reopened her design career, this time on her own terms, supported by allies who respected her strength. She became a voice for women who had been silenced, using her platform to remind them that betrayal does not define them. And as her child was born months later, healthy and strong, Scarlett held them close and whispered, "We are free, we are whole, and we are stronger than ever." Scarlett Donovan's story did not end in betrayal. It ended in glory. And for every woman watching, it carried a message. No matter how deep the wound, the heart can rise again, brighter than ever before. So that's how the story ends, my wonderful friends. And if you're still here with me right now, it means something in Scarlett's journey touched your heart in a very personal way. Maybe you've been betrayed, maybe you felt invisible, or maybe you've carried pain in silence. But as Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Scarlett's fall and rise remind us that we are never truly powerless. Even in the darkest hours, there is always a choice, to stay broken or to rebuild stronger. Betrayal, humiliation, loss, they do not define us. What defines us is how we rise from them. Epictetus taught that difficulties show a person's true character, and Scarlett showed hers, not by revenge alone, but by reclaiming dignity, truth, and her future. And maybe that's the lesson for you and me tonight. Whatever storms we face, we can stand again. We can heal. We can be more. If this story moved you, please hit the like button, share it with someone who needs hope, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We grow stronger together. The chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars, casting their cold light over the grand ballroom of the Crystal Renaissance Hotel. Tonight was the Bright Futures Gala, an event that gathered the city's most powerful people, CEOs, politicians, celebrities. But for one man, billionaire Daniel Donovan, it was more than just a charity night. It was his stage. And tonight, he planned to showcase not his pregnant wife, but the mistress he believed had already replaced her. Daniel stood tall in his custom tuxedo, a smug grin plastered on his face. On his arm, Cassandra Monroe glided like a predator in silk, a crimson gown hugging every curve, eyes sharp with victory. The crowd whispered, gasped, and then laughed softly, because the scandal was obvious. Daniel wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. He had chosen tonight of all nights to flaunt his betrayal in front of the city's elite. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel's voice boomed through the microphone, smooth as polished glass. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, you will meet someone very important to me, Cassandra Monroe. The crowd erupted in forced applause, but underneath the claps were murmurs like venom. Everyone knew his wife, Scarlett, was 6 months pregnant. Everyone knew she had stood by him, supported him, loved him. Yet here he was, introducing a mistress, as if Scarlett never existed. Cassandra leaned into the microphone, her smile dripping with arrogance. It's an honor to be here tonight, she purred. Daniel and I share a vision, not just for business, but for life. Together, we'll build something remarkable. The words hit like a slap across Scarlett's invisible face. Reporters scribbled furiously, lenses clicked, and investors exchanged looks. It wasn't just a personal scandal, it was a public execution of Scarlett's dignity. Daniel didn't care. His eyes scanned the crowd, daring anyone to challenge him. He believed Scarlett was at home, fragile and forgotten. He believed he had already won. But fate was writing a different script. Just as Cassandra slid her hand across Daniel's chest, the heavy oak doors at the end of the ballroom burst open. A hush fell over the room. The orchestra faltered, notes dying in the thick air. Heads turned, eyes widened, and gasps rose like a wave. Scarlett Donovan stepped inside. 6 months pregnant, her hand rested protectively on her belly, but her posture was unbroken, her gaze unwavering. She wore a sleek midnight blue gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, simple yet regal, as if she had planned this moment for years. The whispers turned into thunderous murmurs. That's his wife. She's pregnant. Dear God, she came. Daniel's confident grin froze, cracking like glass under pressure. Cassandra stiffened, her claws slipping from his arm. Scarlett didn't blink. She didn't falter. She walked with the steady grace of a queen, reclaiming her throne. For the first time that night, Daniel realized the gala was no longer his stage. It belonged to her. And before the night ended, the woman he thought he had defeated would make sure the world saw him for what he truly was. A traitor, a fool, a man about to lose everything. And the entire ballroom held its breath, waiting for Scarlett's first word. Before the night of the gala, before betrayal carved itself into her life like an open wound, Scarlett Donovan had been a believer in love. She wasn't born into wealth or privilege. She was the daughter of a small-town teacher and a nurse, raised in a quiet neighborhood where neighbors shared pies on Sundays and doors were rarely locked. Her childhood was simple, but it was full of warmth. She carried those values with her. even when she moved to the city to chase her dream of becoming an interior designer. Scarlett had talent. She had an eye for detail, a gift for turning empty spaces into sanctuaries. Her work was starting to attract attention, and she could have built a thriving career on her own. But when she met Daniel Donovan, her ambitions shifted. He was charming, magnetic, the kind of man who could walk into a room and command attention with nothing more than a smile. Scarlett thought she had found her forever. At first, Daniel treated her like treasure. He wooed her with candlelit dinners, handwritten notes, and promises whispered under starlit skies. He made her believe in fairy tales. Scarlett, who had always been practical and cautious, let herself fall. Within a year, they were married in a modest ceremony, and for a time she thought she had everything she ever wanted. But marriage slowly became a mirror that reflected sacrifice, and the one making all the sacrifices was Scarlett. When Daniel complained about her late nights at the design studio, she gave it up, convincing herself that supporting his career was more important. "We'll build our empire together," he told her. She believed him. She took a step back, pouring her energy into their home, into his rising star in the business world, and later into their unborn child. Daniel, however, changed as quickly as the seasons. Success fed his ego, and Scarlett watched the man she loved transform into someone colder, hungrier. He began criticizing her choices, her clothes, her friends, even the way she decorated their apartment. "You don't understand how the real world works," he would snap. Scarlett swallowed her hurt, telling herself he was just stressed, just tired. Pregnancy was supposed to bring them closer. When she told Daniel she was expecting, her heart raced with joy and fear. For a brief moment, he seemed excited. He touched her belly, made grand declarations about being a father, promised her the world. But soon the reality of doctor's visits, morning sickness, and mounting expenses soured his mood. He grew distant, spending more nights at the office, more weekends on business trips. Scarlett stayed behind, cradling her growing belly, convincing herself he still cared. Yet deep down, she felt the cracks spreading. The late-night phone calls that ended when she entered the room, the unfamiliar perfume on his suits, the sudden obsession with appearances, it all painted a picture she didn't want to see. Scarlett clung to the belief that love could overcome it. She had given up her career, her independence, her entire world for this man. Surely he wouldn't betray her. And yet, he did. Scarlett's backstory is not just about a woman in love. It's about a woman who gave everything and received nothing in return. She represents every wife who sacrificed dreams, every mother who endured sleepless nights, every woman who believed in a man only to be betrayed. Her pain wasn't just heartbreak, it was humiliation, an erasure of her very being. That is why, when she walked into the gala, she wasn't just a wife confronting a cheating husband. She was a woman carrying years of sacrifice, a belly full of life, and a fire burning deep inside her. Daniel thought she was broken, but Scarlett was just beginning to rise. And what Daniel didn't know was that Scarlett's past had armed her with something he never expected, the power to destroy him. Daniel Donovan wasn't always a billionaire. He liked to remind people that he had started from nothing, that every dollar in his bank account was the result of his own brilliance and relentless drive. It wasn't entirely true. There were family connections, lucky breaks, and underhanded deals. But Daniel had mastered the art of rewriting history. To the public, he was a self-made man. To himself, he was untouchable. Arrogance was Daniel's armor. It radiated from the way he walked into a room, chest high, smile sharp, as though the world existed solely for his amusement. He thrived on admiration, needed it like oxygen. Every compliment was fuel, every envious glance another reason to believe he was destined for greatness. Scarlett once loved that confidence. She had mistaken it for strength. But what had once felt magnetic now revealed itself as poison. As his wealth grew, so did his appetite for attention. He became addicted to being seen. Charity galas, exclusive clubs, private yacht parties. Daniel didn't just attend them, he orchestrated them. The events weren't about raising money or making connections. They were stages where he could bask in the spotlight. He craved the headlines, the photographs, the whispers of, "That's Daniel Donovan, what a man." And Scarlett? She was no longer the shining jewel he wanted by his side. Pregnancy made her glow in ways that frightened him. Too real, too human. To Daniel, her swollen belly wasn't a symbol of love. It was a burden, an anchor that threatened to weigh down his image. He began leaving her out of public events, insisting she was too tired or not ready to be seen. The truth was uglier. He didn't want his brand tarnished by the sight of vulnerability. Enter Cassandra Monroe. Young, ambitious, and beautiful, Cassandra was everything Daniel believed Scarlett could no longer be. She was polished perfection, a woman who understood the power of presentation. With her on his arm, Daniel felt invincible. He paraded her through boardrooms, whispered about her in interviews, let rumors swirl without denying them. Every time Cassandra laughed at one of his jokes, every time she clung to his arm in public, Daniel's ego swelled. But arrogance makes men reckless. Daniel no longer cared about discretion. He flaunted Cassandra as though she were a trophy, convinced no one dared to judge him. He told himself Scarlett would never fight back. She was meek, pregnant, and dependent on him. She would endure the humiliation in silence, just like she always had. The gala was the pinnacle of his arrogance. He had chosen this night to cement Cassandra's place in his world, to humiliate Scarlett without her even being present. He had prepared the speech, arranged the photographers, even planned the reveal of Cassandra's role in his company. It wasn't enough to betray Scarlett privately. Daniel wanted the world to see that he had traded her in for someone younger, sleeker, more glamorous. "People will envy me," he told Cassandra in the limousine on the way to the gala, his tone dripping with smug satisfaction. "They'll see I'm a man who takes what he wants. They'll respect that." But arrogance blinds. Daniel didn't notice the whispers turning sharper, investors exchanging uneasy glances, journalists raising their eyebrows at his brazen display. He was so certain of his invincibility that he missed the cracks forming beneath his feet. What he couldn't fathom was that the very arrogance that made him untouchable was about to make him fall. Because in the same ballroom where he flaunted his mistress, his pregnant wife was about to walk in. And when she did, Daniel Donovan's empire of pride would begin to crumble. And for the first time, the applause he so desperately craved would no longer belong to him. Cassandra Monroe had always believed she was destined for more. More than the small-town life she left behind, more than the string of forgettable jobs she used as stepping stones, more than the men who promised her the world but never delivered. She wasn't going to settle for ordinary. She was going to rise, no matter whose life she had to step over to get there. When she met Daniel Donovan, it felt like destiny. Here was a man with money, power, and influence, and most importantly, here was a man who was dissatisfied with the wife he already had. Scarlett, in Cassandra's eyes, was nothing but dead weight. Pregnant, soft, uninteresting. Cassandra saw her not as a rival, but as a ghost of a woman, someone fading into irrelevance. Cassandra played her part perfectly. She laughed at Daniel's jokes, even the cruel ones. She complimented his ambition, fed his ego, and made herself indispensable in his world. To outsiders, she was poised, sophisticated, the perfect match for a billionaire. Behind closed doors, she whispered promises, fanned the flames of his arrogance, and convinced him that she was the only one who truly understood him. The gala was her coronation. As she glided through the ballroom on Daniel's arm, Cassandra felt the eyes of the city's elite on her. The glittering chandeliers seemed to shine just for her, their golden light wrapping around her like a crown. The whispers didn't sting. They fueled her. Every gasp, every hushed comment about Daniel, parading his mistress, only made her smile sharper. "They're jealous," she thought. "They wish they were me." She had chosen her gown carefully, a crimson silk dress designed to ignite scandal, its plunging neckline daring the crowd to look away. Jewels sparkled at her ears, borrowed from Daniel's private collection, because Cassandra already thought of his wealth as her own. She leaned into him, letting the photographers capture their perfect image, their perfect lie. Cassandra was proud, not just because she had taken Scarlett's place, but because she believed she had defeated her. In her mind, Scarlett was too weak, too naive, too bound by outdated notions of loyalty to ever fight back. Cassandra mocked her privately, rolling her eyes whenever Daniel mentioned his wife. "She'll fade away," she would say with a smirk. "Women like her always do." The truth was, Cassandra didn't just want Daniel. She wanted Scarlett's humiliation. She wanted the satisfaction knowing the wife was at home, pregnant and alone, while she stood radiant under the chandeliers. She wanted the world to see her as the winner in this cruel game of love and power. As Daniel introduced her to investors and politicians, Cassandra imagined the future. She saw herself as the new Mrs. Donovan, draped in couture, commanding attention at every event, controlling the narrative of Daniel's empire. Scarlett would be erased, forgotten, nothing more than a cautionary tale of a woman who couldn't hold on to her husband. In her mind, this night was irreversible proof that she had won. But pride is a dangerous thing. Cassandra was so blinded by her own vanity that she didn't notice the unease in the room. She didn't notice the whispers growing harsher, the investors exchanging looks, the quiet disapproval simmering beneath the applause. And when the doors opened and Scarlett Donovan stepped into the ballroom, belly round with life, eyes fierce with determination, Cassandra's carefully constructed illusion began to crack. Her smirk faltered. Her hand slipped slightly from Daniel's arm, and for the first time, Cassandra felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Fear. Because Scarlett had not been defeated. She had just arrived to reclaim everything Cassandra thought she had stolen.